Game 4, Sunday afternoon. Huge for the Pacers, huge for the Knicks. What's it going to take? What adjustments are going to be key? What can the Pacers do and not do that worked in Game 3? We'll talk about all of it today on the weekend Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Saturday/Sunday whenever you're listening, and welcome into another bonus edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today you're getting this one earlier in the day because Game 4, 3:30 p.m. want this one to breathe for close to 24 hours. Probably not going to be quite that much, and we have a lot to talk about ahead of Game 3, so we'll go a little shorter to dive into it today. If you missed it and you want to hear more about, did I just say Game 3? Game 4. If you want to hear more about Game 3, Derek and I just talked about that yesterday. Derek Kramer, we got into everything that happened. Andrew Nembhard's shot, Tyrese Haliburton's brilliant, Siakam on track, Turner's block, everything. Game 4 is going to be about the Pacers adding on to that and countering whatever the Knicks try to do to adjust. The Knicks are now the team that is in search of answers. Missing OG, they were close. Can they figure stuff out to get over the hump? And can the Pacers be ready for it? We'll dive into some of the stuff that I had in my notes from Game 3, but in a game like that, you just kind of riff, talk about all the big moments. Now we can get a little more detail specific in this one. Looking ahead, I want to start with Siakam. Pascal Siakam was quite good in Game 3, finally climbing over that 20-point barrier and doing it quite handily. And the biggest factor in that, obviously, is that OG Anunoby didn't play, right? That was something that made him vital in the first two games. Even when he wasn't scoring, he's soaking up a tough assignment, which means someone else isn't. In this game without Anunoby, I was curious how the Knicks would handle it. And matchup data is finally out from the NBA. Early in the game, I remember this. My first note of the game, or my second note of the game, was Siakam scores his first basket. He took of the night on Achua very easily. He got the shot he wanted. And Achua didn't end up playing as much as I expected. 3 minutes was the amount of time per the league that Achua spent guarding Siakam. Siakam 3 for 5 in those moments. Very good, right? What ended up happening is Josh Hart ended up guarding him for more. He was the leader in possessions on Siakam, and Siakam crushed that 6 for 7 when Josh Hart was the primary defender there. So he absolutely destroyed those two matchups. And if you go back to the Bucks series, this kind of looks like what you remember, where Brook Lopez was on him to start the series in those cross matches, and he was too slow to keep him from getting to the rim all the time. And he was in drop a lot and just willing to concede some of the elbow stuff. And so Siakam crushed that matchup. And then when they would switch smalls onto him, or when he could get involved in that way, he would punish those. I talked about that all season with the post-ups and stuff. So Achua is more Brook Lopez-y than Anunoby. And so Siakam could get better shots and more open shots. And Hart is too small. That's like a 6-inch height difference. So that allows him to get easier shots, and was a big part in his effective game. And I'm not saying this to say, oh, he was only good because of this. Like, obviously, he's a very good player, and he punished those, and that's what stars do. They get favorable matchups, and they punish them. Here's something interesting, though, that happened late in the game. I don't know if it was super obvious because there was a lot going on. Late, when the Knicks closed, they closed with Deuce McBride, Brunson, Hart, DiVincenzo, Hartenstein, which was fascinating to me. They took the size off the floor. McBride was on Nembhard, and so, which I thought he might be on Haliburton. But the way, and I'm doing too much explaining, the way it shook out was Hartenstein was on Siakam, not Josh Hart. Isaiah Hartenstein was guarding Siakam, and Josh Hart was on Myles Turner. So a key bucket late from Siakam was a pick and roll where Hartenstein's guarding him and he screens for Haliburton. And I bring that up to say, if you remember the crossover preview of the series that Gavin Shaw and I did, we talked about that. I said, I wonder if at some point in the series, and this was related to OG Anunoby and who Anunoby could guard, but I said, I wonder if at some point Hart's going to be guarding a front court player to cook up some cross matching, and then Anunoby could guard Haliburton. And it wasn't Anunoby based, but the Knicks did mix it up. And so late in the game, Hartenstein was on Siakam and Josh Hart was on Myles Turner. Hart, has been basically playing like a 6'4" big man in this series. So I bet and wonder if in Game 2 they start that way. They start the game with Hartenstein on Siakam. Now, listen, Hartenstein and Brook Lopez, like, I think that there are ways that Siakam can still do very well in that alignment, right? In the ways that he did early in the Bucks series as well. I'm just thinking, given the resources the Knicks have available, Hartenstein's a better defender and just as fast as Achua. Not as athletic, but just as fast, or like mobile, I would say. And he's way taller than Josh Hart. So that might be the best blend of size and agility and good defense that the Knicks can put on him. And I think that's why they did it late. And the way the game finished, 2 minutes and 49 seconds of Hartenstein on Siakam. That's almost as much as Precious had. And Siakam was 1 for 3 in that matchup. I'm not saying that's how it's going to be forever. We've seen Siakam punish the center switch up there, but I wonder if that's something you see, especially to start game 3 if Achua starts again. If Achua's on Turner, Hartenstein's on Siakam, and then they flow from there. And as the game rotates out, that changes things. So if Siakam isn't as good or effective or it's harder to get involved early in game 4, that's my prediction why, because you saw the Knicks adjust late and Siakam was just great and deserves a ton of credit for closing that out. But I found that to be a very interesting thing that the Knicks did, that, the Pacers exploited it and they deserve credit for that. But that allowed Siakam to, 26 on 14 shots is ridiculous. He got to the line a bunch. Can he exploit that again? How did the Knicks try to counter that? Do they play Jericho Sims a little more so they can always have size on him? Are they willing to just do Josh Hart on a big the whole game? They played Alec Burks a bunch, but like, do they just try to get? It's just tricky for them given their resources. But I wonder if that's how that will go going forward, because if Siakam's that good, then the Patriots become really dangerous, because then they can be a 2-star, 20-plus point scoring team, and Turner reached that threshold as well. So that is the first big thing that I am looking out for in game 4 is how do the Knicks change up their Siakam approach after he just had a great game? Maybe they don't. Maybe they say, you know what, we need to spend more on Tyrese Haliburton. We need to get more resources going there and cut off his water. I don't know exactly how they'll think about that, because 35 and 7 for Haliburton. The 7 is the number that I think they'll be happier with. Only 22 assists for the Pacers in game 3, right? They self-created a lot of shots, which is impressive, but they wore down the Knicks in ways that they typically don't. So how the Knicks adjust to that will be a very fascinating thing come game 4. A couple other things I want to get to, including how the Pacers defend Brunson. Brunson on the other end of the floor, the Pacers bench, slowing DiVincenzo, if it's even possible to do that reasonably in this series. But I think the Siakam defense is going to be the biggest thing to keep an eye on come game 4. How does New York approach that? What does it mean for the Pacers if it changes up? And how can they just go to Turner in the post if Hart's on him? Do they just drag Turner into a bunch of screens and get Hartenstein on a guard, although he did pretty well on Haliburton a few times? Knicks don't love the switch, so how all that shakes out will be endlessly fascinating. Let's get to Brunson stuff. Before we do that, though, let's talk about FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA, as the Pacers know all too well, and in the NHL, as Knicks fans know all too well because of the New York Rangers. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own during this winner take all time. Right now, new customers on FanDuel get $150. That's a lot in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. How about that? You get $150 to bet on spreads or player props or money lines or whatever you're into. FanDuel's got it all, and plenty more on there, of course. But to get that offer, you got to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen on the weekend. If you're tuning in, check out Locked On Knicks, hear what they have to say about Game 3 and beyond in the series. I'm sure that their opinion is more about getting Brunson going, which is why I really want to talk about Brunson. That was his worst game, air quotes, of the series. He shot under 40%, which is significant. 26 points, but it took him 26 shots to get there. A few free throw attempts in the series, all sorts of good stuff, right? Look, Jalen Brunson is terrific. I mean, the fact that they defended him even that well was impressive to me. He's just an awesome player, but the foot injury matters, right? And I wonder how much that's affecting what he can and can't do in the series. He had 29 in game 2 and 6 free throw attempts, so fewer attempts but more points, but he played less and had the injury and was still plus 26. He was -6 this time, so clearly some less effectiveness, or at least better play from the Pacers with him out there. Can New York turn that around? Can they make that more of a strength for them going forward? Because he is so valuable. right? He commands so much attention. So to start this, I got something wrong, and I explained why. Here's what I'll say it again today in case you haven't heard it. I said, within reason, you have to put a good defender on Jalen Brunson, but like to me, it doesn't matter who it is specifically a lot of the time, right? Whether that's Nembhard or McConnell or Nesmith now in this discussion. What matters more is if you're going to be trapping him and sending two at him when he comes around screens, what matters more is who's the backline defense, who's the guys behind the play, can they rotate well? And so, yeah, it matters who's on him, I guess, but what really matters is how well they're executing behind the play. All that matters is can the guy on him effectively contain him and set up those double teams to make the defense play the best way they can. What I didn't account for and what ended up happening a good amount in game 3 was Nesmith was on him, and Nesmith is bigger and longer and rangier. And so just for a split second, it's harder for Brunson to get it out of the traps, to get it to the right guy, right? They're always trying to ice him if they can. It's hard. He wants to go left all the time. Not all the time, but he likes going left. Can they do that again? But what worked with Nesmith was, it's just a split bit harder to make a pass from Brunson to the next guy, whether it's the shooter or Hartenstein to facilitate at the top with more length on him. And that split second allows the guys at the back to have more time to get in position or rotate or pre-rotate or get ready for an exhale, whatever they have to do. So that helped a good amount. Can New York find a way to make those passes easier or more crisp? Just give Brunson a sliver more space, and that'll go a long way. He had 6 assists and 5 turnovers in this game. He had 5 turnovers. In the first 2 games combined, he had 4, right? So, excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong side. He had 4 in game 1 and 2 in game 2. So still progress made there for the Pacers defensively. So how are the Knicks going to try to combat that? Because it's funny, like you go back and watch parts of game 1, like the Knicks were like, yeah, we'll get Nesmith up on Brunson. We don't care. Like Nesmith's man would set screens. And then if they would trap or switch or whatever, they're like, okay. So like they weren't afraid of that matchup early in the series, which is why it's so fascinating to me that it worked so well as an adjustment for the Pacers, and they deserve credit. And Nesmith does too. He played excellent defense, but the Knicks were on that. They were okay with that and even did it on purpose. So how much of game 3 was Nesmith? And to be clear, I'll start by saying I think he did very well. Some of the Brunson struggles, air quotes, from game 3 were Nesmith related versus how much of it is just Brunson's foot and that, or the coverage being new on him. There's like a lot of factors in this. So if they can adjust or he feels better, does it look the same in game 4? I think the Pacers should start the game in that same alignment. Clearly it was their best choice yet in this. And, Nembhard on DiVincenzo, obviously they've got to be better there, but and then Haliburton on Hart is like fine. You can live with all those matchups, but I'll be curious if they do that again, if the Knicks are more prepared with answers to make their backside of the play stuff look a lot better. Of course, stick with it. Size mattered. And the reason I think that size, maybe I undersold this a little bit, but like the best the Sixers in the first round were able to do on Brunson was when they went Oubre and Batum on him. And that's their size. That's the rangy size they were willing to put on him. And he was still amazing against them. But, that's clearly something is there. Like Brunson in every matchup he's in is shorter, right? Like almost except for McConnell. Basically every matchup he's in, every game, he's a shorter player. That's what makes his skill so remarkable. So adding size adds to the degree of difficulty, but it takes size off of someone else. So the first round, the Sixers did that. We've seen this with the Pacers now with Nesmith. What are the Knicks going to counter with? How can they be prepared? Can DiVincenzo just keep doing this? Can Hart be more of a facilitator? Can Hartenstein be like game 2 again? That's the kind of stuff I'll be looking for in that matchup on the Knicks offensive side of the ball. But the other side of the floor matters just as much. I think one more thing on that. If Hart is still being guarded by Haliburton, I bet you see more Hart screens and specifically making Haliburton the second guy in a lot of those plays because then Hartenstein can get going. Haliburton's got to rotate. Hart's been pretty good in this series as a shooter and facilitator. Who knows if he can do that forever, but I bet you see more of that in game 3 too. Okay, other end of the floor, that also matters. Is Brunson on defense. And this matters to me because I said this before game 3, and then it happened once, and I put it in my notes, but I'll get to more stats now. There was a play in the second quarter. Nesmith caught the ball. Brunson was on him. Pacers early screen. I think it was Siakam. And Nesmith, who never handles and pick and rolls hardly ever, but he just skated into the lane and scored. And it was not an easy shot, but he made it. That's something I wondered is, can the Pacers get Brunson into the action when he's a defender more often? He doesn't even have to be guarding the ball. He can be guarding the screener. He's still in the play, right? And so that play stood out to me as like, there we go. They're targeting him a bit. And the Knicks do the same thing with Haliburton. It's just how it goes. So it's just one Nesmith bucket, but like I will never forget that play as a, hey, let's target that guy, right? He doesn't have to handle the ball for this to be a solution, though. He can be a screener. He can be a ghost screener, right? Going back to round one, the Knicks changed things up, or the Bucks changed things up. They said, Brook Lopez, you're on Aaron Nesmith now, right? We'll let him shoot. He's not going to handle it. He's the least ball handling guy of the starting five. You guard him. And in game 5, the Pacers were like, oh boy, we don't know what we're doing. We're flattening out. This isn't going well. And then in game 6, Nesmith would run up and set a ghost screen, and Brook Lopez is really high up, and all of a sudden there's a scramble, and then there's a lane to the basket, and it worked really well. And Nesmith had a nice game, and he shot it well too. That can be what matters. Nesmith setting the screen himself, or Nesmith pretending to set a screen and just making the defense think he might. Like, all that really matters too. So I wonder how involved he is offensively, not even with the ball, but just like around the play to keep Brunson in it. Jalen Brunson did not guard a single player for more than 2 minutes of time in game 3, according to the NBA's matchup data, except for Nesmith, who he guarded for 7.5 minutes. The NBA logged it as 36 partial possessions in which the Pacers scored 44 points, was Nesmith on Brunson. For those of you doing math at home, that's a 122.2 offensive rating. That's very good. That would be the best in the NBA. That's a small sample, but still, that appears to be effective. Nesmith himself in those possessions only shot twice, right? So it's not like they're just, Nesmith would go mismatch hunt. That's not his game, but it still helps them to, if that's a thing and he can make that happen, that's a big deal. So I'll be curious what that involvement looks like. Brunson on Nembhard only happened for 3 minutes, but both of Nembhard's makes were Brunson on him shots. So it's not as easy as just like target that guy every time. Like you would like to target weak points in the playoffs. Duh, every team's trying to do that, including the Knicks. But keeping him involved defensively, of course, is a way to get points. He's shorter, but also wears him out for offense. So I think the Brunson angle, just as much as the Siakam angle, will be huge in game 4. Can the Knicks hide him defensively effectively, and can they get him going more offensively? Because more turnovers, less efficient. Just his worst game of the series. Was that Nesmith related? Was that injury related? Was that new coverage related? And he just had to think for a split second more than he did in previous games, and that helped the Pacers be good enough on the back line. I don't know. And you know how I'll know? In game 4, if the same stuff happens again, then it might be Nesmith related. Or if the same stuff doesn't happen again, it might be Fort related. We'll see. The playoffs reveal. But I think the Pacers should stick with that. I was wrong to suggest that it wasn't super critical who specifically was on him. And I'll be fascinated to see how they can work him in, the Pacers, on the other side of the floor to make him less effective. Let's close out with a couple more little things, just 2 more on the bench. And I want to talk a little bit about slowing DiVincenzo to the extent that that's even possible. Before we talk about any of that, we're going to talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The winning formula for championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Plus, with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today on the weekend. If Locked On Nuggets or Locked On Wolves uploaded recently, check those out. That game 3 was epic. The champs looks like the champs. Can't wait for game 4 of that series, which is right after Pacers Knicks. ABC for Pacers Knicks tomorrow. TNT for that game. I can't wait. We're about 20 minutes away from Mavs Thunder. This is a great conference semifinal round. The Cavs made it interesting. Every series is good. And Locked On has a show for all of it, where no series will be sweeps. There's stakes. This is a great playoffs. Let's wrap up with some more thoughts. The bench. Worst bench game for the Pacers this series in game 3. Maybe the worst of the postseason. I mean, in the first round, I said this a lot. Like, McConnell was not, in the first round, he wasn't as good. But he routinely would have, like, a bad half and a fine half. Not a good half, but a fine half. And Toppin would routinely have a good half and an half. And Shepherd was pretty consistent. The bench was like a roller coaster in the first round. This series, the bench was great, and then they were great again, and then they were awful. So they've been all over the spectrum. It hasn't been like the first round where it's been more, they've gotten guys to be effective in every game, I thought, except for game 5 of the first round, at least at times. No one was effective really off the bench in game 3. Shepherd was fine. He missed a lot of shots, but his defense is good. So what happened there? I mean, is it just as simple as missing shots? I mean, that group combined was 7 for, I'm doing math real silly, 7 for 22, under a third from the field. And that includes 2 out of 3 from Isaiah Jackson. Toppin, McConnell, and Shepherd weren't hitting anything. They missed every 3 they took as a bench group. They didn't turn it over too much, but they really stunk it up defensively too. That was concerning because they've been able to get out and run. McConnell was a good Brunson counter for much of the series. Is it fair to read into this and say, maybe this bench group can't do this? I mean, they had 2 good games already in the series. I don't think they'll be this bad again, right? We've seen them be better than this. And like, these are anomaly shooting percentages for all of Toppin, McConnell, and Shepherd for a 1-game sample. Obviously some high-end ones at the starter. So I think they'll just be better in the next game. I didn't notice anything that was like, oh, they're so much more obviously doing this or that to slow this stuff down. I mean, there's the way Toppin gets his buckets. Like, you're not going to throw a bunch of attention at him. Then McConnell's just getting in the lane or someone else is open. Can't defend him that way. It's not a thing that happens. So for him, it's just mop up shots he's good at it, right? He had 3 assists. He was like, okay. So he'll get his shots in a game. If he makes them, that's even better, obviously. McConnell can create his own shot. Maybe sometimes it doesn't fall. It didn't in game 3. They were a little more locked in on them, like the Bucks were early in the series. There was still no zone from New York. So I think McConnell's going to be able to wiggle free for those shots again. He got 10 up. Like, again, he's kind of like a lot of guys on the Pacers to me where there's very rarely a TJ McConnell shot that I think is bad. There's some that I'm like, but there's very rarely ones that I think are bad. If he got 10 up, he found space to get 10 up, if you get what I'm saying. And then Shepherd just takes catch and shoot open shots and drives to the basket. He was 1 for 5. I think they will be better, but I also think, with McConnell specifically as the head of the snake, if they were better on him, and that matters a lot in making everybody else's life harder, including McConnell. So if he specifically can't get going in game 4, it might be hard for the rest of that group to do so. They did change up the substitution pattern. I think some of that was Nesmith related, and Nesmith ended up leading the Pacers in minutes. Like, Shepherd came in before he usually does in this game. Nesmith was with the second unit group that had Siakam with it late in the first and early in the second, I believe. So I'll be curious if the Pacers stick with that or if they kind of go back to their old bench. But again, when you win a game, it's more easy to say, let's stick with what worked rather than what didn't. The last thing that did not work for the Pacers is defending Donte DiVincenzo. And it hasn't worked for anyone in the playoffs, including the 76ers, defending Donte DiVincenzo. My Lord, has he been good in the playoffs? Obviously, Brunson deservedly getting all the attention. In game 5 of Sixers Knicks, DiVincenzo was bad. 3 for 10 for 9 points. They lost in overtime. Since then, 23 points, 5 for 9 from 3 in game 6. They closed it out. 5 for 9 from 3 in game 1 of this series. He had 25. 6 for 12 from 3 in game 2. He had 28. And 7 for 11 from 3 in game 3. He had 35. Ridiculous run of offensive explosion from him. Some good passing as well. 4 assists, 6 boards in game 2 of this series. He had 7 assists in the closeout against the Sixers. He's clearly playing well. He's in some sort of flow state offensively. And I say that to say, I think he can continue to do this. I don't know if at this level, like this shooting percentages are unbelievable, but he is routinely like the guy that, sometimes we always talk about this, like for the Bucks series, it was like, oh, you just live with Brook Lopez threes, and he made them, and that was impressive. You live with something. Maybe they don't want to live with DiVincenzo shots, but it feels like at times they're like, well, if we are going to guard Brunson this way, and then Hartenstein's going to be the fulcrum, that might just happen. And they're trying to be clearly better on him, but I say all that to say he's been amazing, and clearly they would like to do better. You don't want anyone to score 35 when you're playing a banged up team, and they only have a few threats to really do that. But at the same time, I wonder with DiVincenzo, is this just a natural consequence of guarding the Knicks? Like, if you want to slow Brunson and take him specifically out of rhythm and gook up what New York is doing and make it hard for him to create or make it hard for him to get it to Hartenstein to create, are you just living with Josh Hart and DiVincenzo finishing with whatever they finish with? I don't think you want to if he's this good, but at what point is that what you live with? Nembhard was on him for 6 minutes of game 3. He was 3 for 6, including 2 for 5 from deep. A lot of time with Tyrese Haliburton on DiVincenzo. Same thing, 3 for 6, although he was 1 for 1 from deep in those moments. The Knicks specifically, did not have a good offensive rating with Haliburton on DiVincenzo. They had a much better offensive rating with Nembhard on DiVincenzo and a very good one when Shepherd was on him for a couple minutes throughout the game, a little over 3. So I think you got to stick with Nembhard on him, and then at least you're not letting him like drive all the time and create that way. He's just making threes, and that's still an awesome thing for the Knicks to have. I mean, 60%, I can't do math that fast, but 60% of his points were threes in game 3, over that in game 2. Like he's just absolutely over that in game 2 and 1, right? It's just shooting. So at what point do you just keep a guy who can't let him drive and hope he misses threes at one point? I think they're already at that point because maybe it is a natural consequence of the way they're defending, but I think he passed the threshold of like, we don't care, right? If he makes threes, he makes threes. You know, they've got to find a way to be up on him more in a way that doesn't compromise the rest of their defense. Maybe that means Josh Hart and Precious Achiuwa have a lot of easy lanes, and Josh Hart's done a wonderful job. Josh Hart has been so awesome in the series. He cuts at the perfect time when the attention goes somewhere else, right? And that's what has made him so good. So if you turn a little more attention to DiVincenzo, that's going to be there. And like Achiuwa's not a joke. He's athletic. So I wonder how much of stopping DiVincenzo, especially with Nembhard, is truly let's stop him from driving. If he makes threes, he makes threes. And how much of it is just a natural consequence of the way the Pacers want to slow Brunson. But I think they have to send a little more attention his way. And if they can do that without compromising anything else, then they'll be cooking. And maybe they can finally like be the first team in the series to take a lead that is significant and matters. Because every time a team gets up, 11, I think is the biggest lead in the series, maybe 12. It doesn't feel like it. Like the gravity of the series just pulls it back to neutral. That's why all these games are so close. I can't wait for game 4. This is the stuff I'm watching for. If you have some, let me know on Twitter at Tony R. East or comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. I have nothing else. It's a weekend show. I'll keep it a little shorter so you guys can enjoy the nice weather and get ready for the game. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you very soon.